Hey friends, tonight we drift into the highlands of East Africa, where the red earth warms beneath your feet and the wind whispers stories no one seems to tell anymore. You're standing at the edge of a forgotten world, a land of incense and elephants, obsidian coins and hidden kings, where trade routes shimmered like desert mirages and entire civilizations vanished into the hush of history. Yes, tonight we're heading deep into ancient Ethiopia to uncover the quiet rise of the Aksumite Empire. You've heard of Rome, maybe Carthage, but Aksum? Unless you're a particularly spicy archaeologist or you once fell asleep on the wrong Wikipedia page at 3 a.m., probably not. And honestly, if you had to live through half of what Aksum did, plagues, Roman emperors, and rhinoceros taxes, you'd need a nap too. So before you get cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. Now turn off the lights, crank up that soft fan noise, and let's begin tonight's journey. You step through the dry grasses of the Horn of Africa. It's the 1st century CE. The stars above you are exactly the same ones early Aksumite traders once followed as they led camel caravans through the Danakil Desert. You're in a world that feels asleep, but it's anything but dormant. Aksum wasn't born in a blaze of conquest or a clash of chariots. Number It began in the quiet of stone terraces and long shadowed mornings over the Tigray Plateau. People here had built something older still, Dumped, a mysterious kingdom that flickered like a candle in a storm centuries before Aksum even stirred. And yet, by the 1st century, something had shifted. Your sandals crunch over a floor of basalt blocks. Above you rises a towering obelisk, not the kind you've seen in Egypt. No, these are stele, Aksumite monoliths carved from single pieces of granite, raised without mortar, without cranes, just with pulleys, people, and a very intense sense of drama. They don't mark tombs, not really, not always. Some still argue their exact purpose: status symbols, cosmic maps, portal markers. Historians still debate whether they were religious signposts or funerary monuments, or something even stranger. You walk past one, the largest, the obelisk of Aksum, 24 meters high. It's leaning slightly, like it's trying to hear your thoughts. That's okay. You're just as curious as it is. Behind it, the city hums softly in the dark, not with neon or engines, but the shuffle of sandals, the grind of grainstones, the murmurs of Sabaean and Ge'ez, and the jangle of gold coins dropped into carved wooden boxes. Aksum is awake. But how did a kingdom in the Ethiopian highlands, cut off from rivers like the Nile or the Tigris, become one of the most powerful trading empires of the ancient world? Oh, the answer, of course, is the Red Sea. You step to the coast. Okay, not literally. You're using your imagination here. But in the port of Adulis, seagulls scream overhead and incense curls up from enormous piles stacked on ships made of sewn planks and black gum. You can smell frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, spices that'll one day end up on Roman dining tables or Pharaoh's embalming altars. Aksum is perfectly placed, south of Egypt, north of the gold mines of Nubia, just across from Arabia. Traders from India, Persia, even the far-off empire of China are docking at Adulis, and they're met by tall, dignified men wearing white cotton and gold torques, speaking in Ge'ez, the sacred tongue of a rising elite. The emperor isn't here, not yet, but his reach stretches across the sea like a silent hand, and while you're inhaling the scent of faraway lands, here comes your first odd fact of the night. Aksumite coins were the first in sub-Saharan Africa, and they had engraved crosses centuries before most of Europe did. And one emperor, he stamped his coin with the image of a crescent and disc on one side and a Christian cross on the other. Dual branding, very modern. Also, of course, not everything in Aksum makes perfect sense. You're passing through a market where traders haggle over ivory and rhino horn. But wait, there's no rhino in northern Ethiopia. So where is it coming from? Scholars still can't quite agree. Did Aksum have southern outposts, secret hunting expeditions? Or was the ivory smuggled in through inland routes still buried under time and soil? The uncertainty makes it better, doesn't it? You walk farther inland, you can hear church bells, except they're not bells yet. The sounds come from drums and horns, used in pre-Christian rituals. Aksum hasn't converted yet, but something's brewing. There's a new religion coming from the Levant. Quietly, traders speak of a man named Jesus. His followers are scattering, and some have wandered this far. It's hard to imagine now, but soon, very soon, Aksum will be among the first empires on earth to adopt Christianity as a state religion, even before Rome. But you're not there yet. You stand at the edge of a hill overlooking Aksum. You can see stone houses, stepped fields, sheep herders. You hear distant prayers to gods now forgotten. And somewhere, in the glow of a house lantern, a scroll is being read, Ge'ez characters flowing like vines across parchment. There's a calm in this moment, a stillness. You've just brushed the surface of Aksum's story, and already the air feels denser with time. So take a breath. Let your thoughts settle. You're still with me, aren't you? The sun lifts just slightly above the red horizon. You can feel it against your eyelids, even as you drift deeper into this ancient world. Aksum doesn't dazzle you with noise. It's not Rome. It doesn't demand attention like Babylon. It persists like a mountain shadow, solid, patient. You walk through terraces etched into the hillsides like wrinkles of a wise old face. Wheat and barley sway gently in the wind. Oxen turn the soil. Somewhere, a woman hums a lullaby in Ge'ez, a language you don't understand, but the tune feels familiar, like something your grandmother might have sung while folding clothes. In the distance, the city murmurs with growing confidence. By the 3rd century, Aksum is more than a trader's pit stop. It's a capital. The King of Kings lives here now, and his full title takes nearly 30 seconds to say out loud. If you're counting syllables, you'll be asleep before the end. Gold drips from royal tombs, silver coins jingle in merchant pouches, elephants march in royal processions, not for war, but for prestige. Honestly, it's a bit of a flex, and that's where you meet King Azana. He's young when he takes the throne, maybe too young, but his story will reshape Aksum and put it on a path that historians still debate today. Because Azana is the one who officially converts Aksum to Christianity. No slow drift, no underground churches. One day the kingdom worships old gods, Mahrem, Beher, Astar, and the next, A cross is engraved on coinage, churches begin to rise, and Azana declares himself a servant of the one true God. Was it personal conviction, a political alliance with the Byzantines, or just really good missionary PR? No one agrees. But it happens fast, suspiciously fast. And here's your strange detail of the night. Izana leaves behind a stone inscription in 3 languages, Greek, Ge'ez, and Sabian, explaining his victories and his god. The Rosetta Stone of East Africa, essentially. But guess what? It wasn't discovered until 1981 by accident. Some guy literally tripped over it. You pass by that stone now. Your fingertips brush the ancient script carved into it. Smooth, cool, silent. It doesn't boast. It simply waits. You continue on, deeper into the city. There's no central coliseum here, no golden palace. Aksumite grandeur is quiet. The city is stone and shadow. Its power lies not in spectacle, but in connectivity. Because through this city, goods from India, Sri Lanka, Persia, even the Roman Empire all pass. Silk, pearls, spices, exotic animals, somehow they all end up in Aksum's markets. And from there, they scatter outward, sewn into Roman tunics or burned in Arabian temples. Even Roman emperors knew the name. In fact, a Roman official once ranked Aksum alongside Rome, China, and Persia as one of the 4 great world powers. Not bad for a kingdom that didn't even have a river. You pause at a small clay workshop. An old man shapes incense burners by hand. They're simple, elegant. One bears a symbol, a cross within a circle, a pre-Christian symbol, maybe, or a Christian one redesigned to blend in. The lines blur, as they always do. Aksum's religion is changing. So is its language. So is its reach. You pass camels. You pass priests. You pass traders unloading teakwood and elephant tusks. It's all here, and it's oddly peaceful. But then, there's a hum beneath the surface. Something is shifting again. Out in the Red Sea, Rome is falling. The Western Empire cracks like old plaster. Trade routes twist. Pirates rise. Disease spreads. Ports close. And Aksum, once the beating heart of Afro-Arabian trade, feels the pulse begin to stutter. But you're not there yet. Not yet. For now, Aksum is alive. You step into a church built in the shape of a cross. The roof beams creak above you. Candles flicker on altars made of smooth black stone. A priest in white robes chants a verse in Ge'ez, his voice deep and deliberate. You feel the words, even if you don't understand them. Outside, the sky turns from rose to gold. And here's your academic debate of the night. Did Aksum collapse because of environmental changes, political shifts, the rise of Islam closing off trade? Or was it a slow internal decay? Scholars still can't agree. Some blame deforestation. Others say climate change caused crop failures. Others point to Sasanian-Persian interference in Red Sea trade. And some believe Aksum simply did what many great empires do, grew old, grew tired, and disappeared beneath its own silence. You're still not at that part, though, because tonight you're not racing toward collapse. You're walking through memory, stone by stone, scent by scent. A small boy offers you a carved lion. It's made of basalt. His grandfather taught him how to shape it. He grins and runs off before you can even say thanks. Somewhere behind you, church bells, actual ones now, begin to ring. It's morning in Aksum, the kind of morning that makes you forget how old the city is, the kind of morning that feels eternal. The sun touches the tops of the stelae again. The light slides down their faces, tracing ancient carvings like gentle fingers. You stand in the center of it all, a world you were never meant to know, a history they almost forgot to tell you. But tonight, it remembered. You pause at the edge of the city, where the highland trees begin to thin and the wind carries dust instead of music. Your feet ache, but it's the good kind of ache, the one that comes from wandering somewhere important. You take one last look at the city of Aksum. From up here, you can see the whole layout, the towering stelae casting long shadows, the clustered homes with their thick stone walls, the thread of life running through every alley and market stall. The city isn't just alive, it's listening. You start your descent along a winding road carved into the hillside. Below, the Gondar Plain stretches into the mist. This isn't just geography, it's strategy. Aksum sits like a watchtower between Africa's interior and the sea beyond. No river required, just altitude, vision, and patience. You pass small villages, each one humming with quiet strength. There are beehive huts and stepped terraces, kids chasing chickens, elders weaving baskets from papyrus. They may not realize it, but they are part of an empire now. Aksum isn't just a city anymore, it's an idea. And like all ideas, it spreads. By the 4th century, Aksumite coins are turning up in India, along the Ganges River. That's very far. Like, who's driving this camel, and why do they know about Ethiopia? Far. One theory, your next fun academic argument, says Aksum wasn't just trading with India. It had colonies, maybe even outposts along the Arabian coast. Some scholars claim Aksum controlled parts of modern-day Yemen. They even invaded it under King Caleb. And here's your weird detail of the night. The invasion wasn't over spices or gold. It was over religion. See, a Jewish king in Himyar, southern Arabia, had persecuted Christians, and Caleb, the Aksumite king, decided to intervene. He sent an army across the Red Sea, crushed the Himyarite king, and installed a Christian ruler in his place. It was a crusade before the Crusades. Also, imagine the logistics: crossing a sea, invading a country, and then managing a proxy government in the 6th century. Aksum made it look easy for a while, but the more you walk, the more you start to feel it, the quiet tension. Trade is changing. The old Roman roots are collapsing. The Byzantine Empire now dominates the East. And then something monumental happens. Islam rises in Arabia, and suddenly the Red Sea becomes a different kind of border. Muslim merchants control the ports. Trade routes once open to Aksum begin to shift north or vanish altogether. Aksum doesn't fall in a blaze. No invaders topple its obelisks. There's no dramatic betrayal, no apocalyptic siege. Instead, it just fades, like smoke after incense. You walk past a well, deep and stone-lined. An old woman draws water with practiced hands. She doesn't look up, doesn't need to. This is her home, and always has been. You ask her, what happened to Aksum? She shrugs. It moved, she says. And she's right. Sometime in the 7th or 8th century, the capital relocates, southward, away from the vulnerable trade coasts. The shift is quiet, almost passive. No proclamations, no fireworks, just a change in the wind. Aksum becomes a shadow, but not a dead one. Its traditions carry on. Its language, Ge'ez, becomes the liturgical language of Ethiopian Christianity. Its coinage inspires designs centuries later. Its cross, the Aksumite cross, still hangs from the necks of pilgrims and priests to this day. Even in modern Ethiopia, traces of Aksum linger in the stories, in the symbols, in the belief that their emperors descended from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, a lineage that traces all the way back through legend and myth to Aksumite grandeur. You stand now in a small chapel built from stone, rough-hewn and cool. A priest lights a candle and smiles at you. He doesn't say anything, but somehow you understand because you've walked their paths, touched their coins, heard their bells, watched their sunrise, and you've felt what Aksum truly was, not just a place, but a presence, one that never fully left. You're walking again, but this time not through Aksum's stone alleys or highland terraces. No, this time you're traveling through memory, through myth, through the long echo of a civilization trying very hard not to be forgotten. The world has shifted. It's the 6th century now, maybe early 7th. You're not exactly sure. Time in Aksum doesn't move like it does in Rome or Constantinople. Here, time is layered, like sediment. You don't march through it, you sink. The old capital is quieter now, not dead, not even decaying, just patient. In the same way, a great tree doesn't panic when winter comes, it waits. But out in the Red Sea, winter has already arrived. Trade is drying up. Once busy ports whisper with rust. The merchants who once docked in Adulis now steer toward Mecca, Medina, or the Gulf. The Islamic caliphates are expanding, and while Aksum was once seen as a tolerant Christian ally, it's increasingly isolated from the great commercial arteries of the world. You walk the harbor of Adulis now. It smells of brine and abandonment. Fishing boats bob gently, but the larger vessels, the spice ships, the silk-bearing beasts of the ocean, they're gone. A black cat winds between your legs and vanishes into a broken crate of peppercorns. You feel like it just cursed you, but also it's probably the best dressed being in town right now. Here's your weird but true detail for this stretch. Some records suggest that Aksumite ships were still being used by Muslim merchants decades after the kingdom's influence began to fade. The ships endured longer than the empire, kind of like your grandmother's Tupperware. But as Adulis empties, a new kind of movement begins. You step inland again. You're following monks now. Thin, barefoot, sun-kissed men with scrolls tucked under their arms and crosses etched into their foreheads. Their robes are plain. Their faith is not. Christianity in Aksum isn't shrinking. It's transforming. With international trade in decline, the kingdom turns inward. And into this inward gaze, something extraordinary happens. Monasteries bloom like desert flowers, on mountaintops, in cave mouths, along riverbanks, each one a tiny world, a pocket of devotion carved from stone and silence. You arrive at one now. The monastery is chiseled directly into a cliffside. There are no stairs. You have to climb. Yes, you in your fuzzy socks and sweatpants, now must climb a stone face with no harness. One wrong move, and you'll be another unsolved mystery documentary. But you make it, and inside, it's like stepping into a candle. Frescoes of biblical scenes line the walls, angels with wide eyes, saints with elongated fingers, a Christ that looks both Ethiopian and eternal. The monks here speak little, but when they chant, their voices fill the cavern like the sea fills a conch shell. This is Debre Damo, one of many Ethiopian monasteries with roots stretching back to Aksumite times. And it's here you realize, while Aksum the kingdom may be slipping away, Aksum the culture is only just beginning. Which brings you to tonight's historical debate. Did Aksum really fall, or did it just transform into early medieval Ethiopia? Some scholars argue there was a clear collapse, trade gone, capital moved, silence. Others believe it was a continuum, a quiet evolution from a coastal power into a spiritual highland kingdom that would later become the Zagwe dynasty and eventually the Solomonic line. Your guide, a monk with a beard so majestic it might qualify as its own relic, offers you honey wine in a carved wooden cup. You sip. It tastes like fermented sunlight. He says nothing, but his eyes say, "The kingdom did not die. It went home." You stay the night in a cell carved from stone. The walls are cool. The wind whistles like an old flute through the cracks. Somewhere, a goat bleats at something that may or may not be supernatural. You drift to sleep beneath stars that haven't moved in 10,000 years. When you wake, it's morning again, and the journey continues. You're walking with pilgrims now, dozens of them, some on foot, some on donkeys, some wrapped in white cotton, their heads bowed in prayer. They're making their way toward Aksum, yes, the old city, but not for politics or trade or empire. They're here for something much stranger, the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that Ark, as in 10 Commandments, melting Nazis in Raiders' Ark. Supposedly, it's here, in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, guarded by a single monk who can never leave. No photos allowed, no entry permitted. Can you see it? Number? Can you ask him about it? Also number. Can you hear tourists ask him anyway, and watch him sigh deeply? Absolutely. This is your strange fact of the night. The belief that Ethiopia houses the Ark of the Covenant is not a fringe theory. It's a core tradition of Ethiopian Christianity, and that tradition traces all the way back to Aksum. According to Ethiopian legend, the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, bore him a son named Menelik, and Menelik later brought the Ark to Ethiopia for safekeeping. Modern historians scoff, politely, sometimes not politely, but the story endures. You approach the church. The building itself is modest, by cathedral standards, but the air buzzes. There's a tension, like something vast is asleep just under the floorboards. You don't go inside, you just stand there. You feel something ancient, something alive. You walk away quietly. And now a confession. You've started to believe, not necessarily in the Ark, not even in all the legends, but in the weight of it all. The feeling that history here is not linear, not clean. It doesn't start and end, it layers. Aksum rose, yes, but it also sank into the roots of a tree still growing. You walk back to the hills. A young boy runs past you with a carved lion in his hands, just like the one from earlier. Was it him, his grandson, or is this a dream and you're just looping through memory? Hard to say. Doesn't matter. You're here. And Aksum, so are you. You're no longer walking forward in time. You're circling, looping, like the endless spirals carved into Aksumite stele, round and round, deeper into meaning, deeper into myth. You find yourself now in a market town nestled in the highlands. The year is hard to pin down. It could be the 8th century or the 12th. Time is soft here, like river clay between your toes. The voices are new, but the rhythms, those are ancient. A woman sells incense from a wide reed basket, myrrh, frankincense, resinous chunks like fossilized starlight. She grinds one with a stone and lets you smell it, sharp, earthy, sacred. You blink, and suddenly you're back in Adulis, a century ago. Aksum is gone from maps, but not from memory. It exists in gestures, in spices, in silence. You're beginning to understand something crucial. Aksum never really needed armies to endure. It used memory, and memory is harder to erase than monuments. You duck into a tiny church carved into a boulder. A candle burns at the foot of an altar, illuminating a battered icon of the Virgin Mary. The painting is cracked but glowing. There's gold leaf around her head and something else, something familiar. You squint. There, beneath the paint, the faint, faded outline of a stela worked into the background like a secret. You ask a young priest why it's there. He shrugs. It's always been like that, he says. That's Aksum, always in the background, quietly watching. You follow a winding trail up a ridge. The air thins. Trees grow shorter. A distant bell rings somewhere below. And here comes your odd fact of the night. Aksumite engineering, those massive obelisks, underground tombs, water storage systems, were so sophisticated that later generations couldn't replicate them. Even when they tried, the knowledge had slipped, like trying to remember a dream after waking. You reach a monastery high above a ravine. It's barely held together by prayer and ivy. Inside, 2 monks argue, softly, politely, about the date of a manuscript. One claims it's 800 years old. The other says 1200. You ask who's right. They look at you and smile. Time isn't so exact here, one says, pouring you tea. You sip. It tastes like cinnamon and centuries. Let's go deeper. You've heard about the Solomonic dynasty, a line of Ethiopian emperors who claimed descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. That legacy, that crown, it wasn't invented out of thin air. It was built on Aksumite bones. The connection is more than myth. Coins, inscriptions, and religious symbols all thread the Solomonic identity back to Aksum. Even their imperial titles, Nagusa Nagast, King of Kings, echo Aksumite grandeur. Now you're walking into a royal compound, not a modern one from centuries ago. Walls of stone and lime, no mortar, just precision. Aksumite masonry lived on here, adapted, reinterpreted, but unmistakable. The throne is gone, but the foundation remains. Which brings us to tonight's historical wrestling match. Was medieval Ethiopia a resurrection of Aksum, or an entirely new creation inspired by it? Some scholars say yes. The cultural continuity is clear. Religion, language, architecture. Others argue that centuries of change, invasion, and migration fractured the connection beyond recognition. Your opinion? You're leaning toward the poetic answer. Aksum didn't disappear, it reincarnated. The sky is turning a burnt orange now. You descend a hillside past a field of teff, a grain so ancient it might be the last living thread between you and the people of the first stele. It's harvested the same way, ground the same way, baked into flatbread the same way. You take a bite of injera offered by a woman at a roadside fire. It's sour, warm, full of history. She tells you stories passed down from her great-grandmother. Not myths, not legends, memories. One of them is about a lion that guarded the last treasure of Aksum, deep beneath a ruined monastery. Another speaks of a church bell that rang on its own when the last emperor died. A third, your favorite, says that the stele leans slightly toward Mecca now, as a silent truce between ancient faiths. You smile. You don't ask if they're true, because they are. Back in the hills, the air grows cooler. Crickets begin their nightly orchestra. You pass a shepherd. He's old. His face is like leather. His sheep are white. His staff older than the United Nations. He asks where you're from. You say, far. He nods, then says, everything is far, but also near. Okay, so maybe he's a poet, but also he's right. You've come far, haven't you? From bustling markets to silent monasteries, from coin-engraved power to vine-wrapped ruins. And still, Aksum walks beside you. Let's close this part with your weirdest footnote yet. Some ancient sources, notably a Persian document, referred to Aksum as a land of immortal priests who lived in golden towers and spoke the language of birds. Yes, birds. Totally unverified, wildly implausible. But you want it to be true, don't you? As the stars return, you settle on a stone beneath a stela. It's cracked, tilted, covered in lichen, but still standing. And so are you. History isn't always a march. Sometimes it's a whisper that never stops echoing. You wake up just before dawn. The stela above you is casting its long shadow westward, just slightly. The world is still. Birds chirp cautiously. For a moment, you forget where you are. But then the wind shifts, and you remember you're in Aksum, or at least what Aksum became. This isn't the city of gold coins and incense-laden ports. This is the ghost-layered version, a place stitched together from half-remembered myths, stone foundations, and the quiet devotion of a people who refused to let their past be swallowed whole. You start walking again, because that's what you do here. You walk. Past terraced farms, past eucalyptus trees whispering secrets, past children playing in the dust, their laughter echoing between the same hills that once saw royal processions and elephant caravans. The roads you're on now, some of them trace back to Roman maps. There are whispers of old milestones buried beneath villages, carved in Greek, pointing travelers toward Axumis. One even mentions distances in stadia, a measurement you haven't used since ancient gym class. And now, the detail of the night that'll rattle around your brain forever. The Romans and Byzantines once sent embassies to Aksum, real ones, with letters, gifts, silk, gold. There are records that Emperor Constantius II wrote directly to King Azana's successor, begging him not to convert fully to Christianity the wrong way. You know, not Roman Christianity. So yes, Aksum mattered that much. You duck into a dusty stone room filled with scrolls. It's a tiny archive hidden in a countryside church. The air smells like sheep and papyrus. A young scribe, barefoot, eyes bright, tells you they're working to digitize Aksumite manuscripts. His laptop is older than you, but it hums with purpose. He shows you a page in Ge'ez. You can't read it, but you feel it. Ink like a heartbeat, language like breath, memory like fire that refuses to go out. You step out into sunlight. Your sandals crunch over volcanic rock, black and brittle. You pass the ruins of a palace, possibly Queen Sheba's, depending on who you ask and how much they enjoy conspiracy theories before breakfast. It's a flat, open site. Columns, foundations, the bones of ambition. Tourists sometimes wander here, but mostly it's quiet, just wind and goats. The structure seems modest by modern standards, but what it represents towers higher than any skyscraper. It whispers, "We were here, we mattered, still do." And now, your academic quandary of the hour. Was the Queen of Sheba Aksumite, or Yemeni, or just mythical? Debates rage. Yemen has the older Sabaean inscriptions. Ethiopia has the living legend, the churches, the line of emperors tracing back to her. Scholars draw maps, others draw swords. And you sip coffee beneath a sycamore and think, she was probably both. The coffee, by the way, is spectacular. Here's a bonus fact you didn't ask for. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. The legend goes that a goat herder named Keldes noticed his goats acting very weird after eating some red berries. Long story short, you now have a caffeine addiction and a personality built around oat milk lattes. Thank Kaldi. You take another sip. It's dark, bitter, sacred. You exhale and let the steam carry your thoughts. The shadows are lengthening. Time to descend again. You walk through Lalibela now, not technically Aksum, but shaped by its ghost. The rock-hewn churches here are miracles, cut downward into living stone, like inverted cathedrals, like holy sinkholes. The priests will tell you angels helped build them. You believe it? The same design elements show up in old Aksumite buildings. Window patterns, cross shapes, door styles. Coincidence? Doubtful. Aksum may have died on paper, but it lived on in the hands of stonemasons, hymn writers, painters, and kings. You sit in the courtyard of Bete Georgis, the Church of St. George. It's shaped like a cross, roof level with the ground, invisible until you're right on top of it. Kind of like Aksum, invisible, but still here. Night falls slowly. You're staying in a guest house run by a woman named Miriam. She gives you soup and a story. Her grandfather used to say that every time it rains in the highlands, it's the old kings of Aksum washing their crowns in the sky. You smile. She shrugs. We believe what keeps us warm. Now let's close this part with one more image. A young boy sits on a stone step, holding a coin he found in the fields. It's weathered, bronze, faint outlines of an Aksumite king on one side, a cross on the other. He shows it to you like it's treasure, and it is, not because it's valuable, but because it's still telling the truth. Aksum was real. It mattered, and somehow it still does. The night is cold now. You wrap yourself in a blanket that smells like eucalyptus and wood smoke and step outside. Above you, the stars have returned, clearer than anywhere else on Earth. No light pollution, no neon, just a canvas the same people of Aksum once looked up to, tracing trade routes in constellations and finding omens in Orion's belt. You lie back on a flat stone, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel like you are them. A stargazer, a merchant, a monk, a king, someone who thought the world was wide but not unreachable. Let's take one final walk. You head north into what used to be called Beta Israel territory, lands where Ethiopian Jews, the Falasha, lived for centuries. Their traditions are ancient, their language part Ge'ez, part Hebrew, part silence. Their presence is yet another echo of Aksum's layered legacy. Because Aksum wasn't a monolith. It was a crossroads of faiths, of cultures, of identities. You arrive at a cliffside village. The homes are carved into the rock. Roosters crow, bread bakes on flat iron pans. Children run barefoot through dust that once soaked in the footsteps of queens and priests and foreign envoys. A shepherd tells you the old stelae still sing when the wind hits just right. He could be joking. But later, when you stand beneath one and the wind whistles through its cracks like a flute, you wonder, maybe the stones really do remember. You hike farther into the hills. At the summit, there's a chapel no bigger than a tool shed. Inside, an old man reads from a Ge'ez manuscript, his lips are barely moving. He sees you, nods once, then says, Aksum is not history. It is memory dressed as stone. You try to write that down. You forget the words halfway through. Doesn't matter. The feeling stays. Now it's time for your final academic twist of the night. What if Aksum wasn't lost at all? What if we only think it was because historians, for centuries, didn't look in the right places? Western scholars, focused on Rome and Greece, miss the quiet brilliance hiding in the Ethiopian highlands. Only in the 20th century did archaeologists begin to take Aksum seriously. And even now, much of the city remains unexcavated. Yes, let that sink in. Beneath the hills, under farmers' homes, in the roots of trees, there are still secrets buried. You may be walking above a royal tomb and not know it. You may have stepped over the next great discovery on your way to buy coffee. And that's what makes Aksum so unforgettable. It's still becoming. You return to the edge of the old city. It's darker now. The stars are brighter. The roads are empty. But the stones, they're still standing. They tilt slightly, weathered, cracked, covered in moss, and yet undefeated. You place your hand on one. It's cold at first, then warm, then quiet. The sky turns lavender behind you. The highlands breathe slowly now, as if the entire region is winding down for the night. But you're just beginning again. Tonight, you start not with ruins, but with a library. Hidden inside a mountaintop monastery, it's a room no bigger than your living room, and yet it contains a millennium of memory. You step in and smell parchment, beeswax, and something like cinnamon but older. A monk opens a chest. Inside, stacks of illuminated manuscripts, written in gaze, painted with ochre and charcoal, edges crumbling delicately, like old dreams. You touch none of them. You only look. The monk holds one up to the window light. It's a copy of the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings. This is the book that tells Ethiopia's version of Solomon and Sheba. It is myth. It is prophecy. It is political manifesto. It is all of those and none. And most of all, it is Aksum. Because even though the Kebra Nagast was written centuries after Aksum's peak, it builds its entire royal claim on Aksumite soil. The Solomonic line doesn't begin in Jerusalem. Not really. It emerges from Aksum, with Menelik I as its child and carrier. You stare at the pages, and they stare back. You leave the monastery before dawn. Your guide, an old man with a walking stick and a suspiciously ageless dog, leads you through the mists to a plateau overlooking the remnants of a vanished village. He tells you a story as you walk. Long ago, the kings of Aksum were buried not just with gold and servants, but with curses carved into the walls of their tombs. Let no one disturb this place, one inscription reads. Let fire strike. Let the sky fall. He pauses. Once, he says, a grave robber tried. What happened, you ask? He squints at you, deadpan. He opened a bakery. You stare. He winks. Apparently, Aksumite curses work in unexpected ways. You descend into one of those tombs now. Stone steps, carved corridors, the smell of wet rock and old air. Your torch flickers. Inside, you find a sarcophagus split open, not by time, but by curiosity. Maybe French archaeologists, maybe looters, maybe both. The walls are covered in carvings, geometric spirals, lions, stars. You spot inscriptions in both Ge'ez and Greek. It's another reminder. Aksum was never provincial. It spoke multiple tongues. It traded across 3 continents. It minted coins in Latin. It was, in a very literal sense, global. And yet, when it collapsed, most of the world forgot, except the people who lived here. They remembered. They kept building churches in the old style, kept naming children after ancient kings, kept telling stories about lions and stelae and stars. Now you're walking through Yeha, a site older than Aksum, but one that flows into its story like a tributary into a river. There's a temple here, nearly 3,000 years old, older than the Bible, older than logic, built with such perfect stonework that you can't slip a coin between the blocks. No mortar, no cement, just precision and pride. The temple was likely dedicated to Almaka, a moon god. Later, it became a Christian church, then a ruin, then a memory, then a tourist site. You place your hand on its wall and realize you're touching something that predates everything you've ever studied. Rome wasn't built yet. Jesus wasn't born yet. Paper didn't exist. And yet, here it stands, patient, humble, watching you like a grandparent who never blinks. Here comes your historical twist of the night. Some scholars now believe that Aksum didn't just inherit Yeha's culture, it absorbed it. That the mysterious kingdom of Dumt, which once ruled from Yeha, passed down its architecture, religion, and even bureaucracy to what became Aksum, which means Aksum wasn't an empire out of nowhere. It was a slow flame, lit over centuries, and perhaps that's why it lasted longer than anyone expected. You end the day at a village where no one speaks English, but everyone smiles like you're already family. A boy draws in the dirt with a stick. He sketches what looks like a lion with wings. You point. He says a word you don't understand. His grandmother chuckles and translates. He says it's the guardian of the old tombs. You nod. Of course it is. You share flatbread, lentils, a hard-boiled egg, and a laugh that needs no words. Later that night, as you fall asleep beneath a sheet of stars, you realize you're not just visiting a forgotten kingdom, you're being adopted by it. You wake to birdsong and the rustle of wind in the highland trees. It's a quiet morning, the kind that makes the whole world feel unhurried. You stretch, sip from a steaming cup of bunna, Ethiopian coffee so strong it could probably resurrect one of those kings you just visited, and begin your next walk. Today, you're tracing the veins of a kingdom not in stone, but in sound. You follow the chants of Orthodox liturgy echoing through the hills. It's Sunday. The people gather in white garments, heads bowed, candles lit. The songs rise not in Latin or Greek, but in Ge'ez, the same language carved into Aksumite stelae 1,500 years ago. That's the detail that lands hard today. Ge'ez isn't a dead language. It's a liturgical language, alive in prayer, in song, in sacred text. You step into a circular church built in the Aksumite style, stone walls, concentric structure, sacred geometry passed down like heirloom seed. Inside, it smells of frankincense and earth. The air hums with reverence. The priest holds up a tablet, a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. Every Ethiopian Orthodox church has one. Some believe it contains divine presence. Others say it's symbolic. But no one dares touch it except the clergy. You don't need proof. You can feel the gravity. It's the kind of belief that doesn't demand explanation, only respect. After the service, you follow a group of villagers down a mountain path. They speak softly, laugh occasionally, carry baskets on their backs and babies on their hips. You ask one man what Aksum means to him. He replies, "It's where we began." Then he adds, "And where we'll end too." You walk beside him in silence. He's not wrong. Midday now. The sun casts strong shadows. You arrive at the edge of a remote excavation site where a team of archaeologists is brushing dirt from what looks like the foundation of a lost basilica. A young woman waves you over. She's been working on Aksumite architecture for years, shows you a stone slab etched with a Greek inscription, likely the marker of a merchant's house from when Aksum's influence reached across the Red Sea. You ask what it says. She frowns, then smiles. Roughly translated, "May God protect this home from fools and floods." You nod, still relevant. Here's your weird fact of the day. Aksumite architects pioneered underground tombs so advanced that modern archaeologists have barely mapped them. Some are rumored to stretch miles beneath the highlands, with ventilation shafts, multi room chambers, and perfect drainage, all without concrete or steel. It's not just forgotten, it's buried genius. You hike to a hilltop called Beta Samadhi, House of Praise. This site, only recently uncovered, has revealed a transitional church from the late Aksumite period, one of the earliest known in sub-Saharan Africa. You run your fingers along its broken edge and imagine a monk standing here 1,400 years ago, reading aloud from a scroll, birds chirping, mountains silent, a world turning slowly but purposefully. As evening falls, you find yourself on the steps of a modern school. The teacher invites you in. Her students are learning Ge'ez, not because they need to, but because they want to, because they were taught that to know where you come from, you must speak the words of your ancestors. One child reads a line aloud from a book, and the mountain stood because it remembered who it was. You don't know if it's scripture, proverb, or just something the teacher made up, but it sticks with you. Back in the village, dinner is simple: stewed lentils, fresh injera, laughter, and the sound of hyenas howling far off in the distance. A man plays the krar, a traditional lyre. The melody winds through the night like smoke. He sings of stele, of gold, of lions, of kings who walk in dreams. He sings of Aksum, and somewhere in the dark you feel it listening. Let's end this part with a moment of stillness. You stand outside, alone. The moon hangs low over the hills. The air is cool, and the ancient stones seem to shimmer faintly in the silver light. Not in a magical way, but in a way that says, we're still here. You're leaving the highlands. Your feet trace the same winding paths carved by camel hooves, imperial processions, and barefoot pilgrims 1,000 years before you. But this time, you're walking not to discover Aksum's past, but to understand how it shapes the present. Below, the city of Aksum still stands. Not the ancient capital in full glory, no marble columns, no roaring forums, but a living town built in the shadow of greatness. Its houses are simple, the streets narrow, and yet the air is dense with memory. You descend quietly into the city. A wedding procession passes by. The bride wears white. The priest walks beside her, holding a wooden cross etched with lion heads. It's the Aksumite lion, the same one found on royal seals, coins, and murals for centuries. You see it everywhere now, on walls, on flags, on bumper stickers. You smile, a forgotten empire made into folk art. You make your way to the heart of town, the Steli Park. It's not fenced, not roped off, just there, like trees in a quiet garden. You can walk right up to them, touch them, lean your head against the carved granite, and feel your heartbeat echo through millennia of stone. There are over 100 of them, some still upright, others fallen, cracked, half buried. The largest were once over 30 meters tall. One collapsed during installation. Another was looted by Italy in 1937 and only returned in 2005. Yeah, it took nearly 70 years. Empires love stealing from other empires, even the dead ones. You sit beneath a leaning obelisk. You've seen it before in books, documentaries, dusty museum catalogs. But here, in person, it feels different. It's not a relic, it's a presence. Now, here's your final strange detail of the series. There are entire underground chambers beneath these stelae, tombs, passageways, rooms still unexplored. Some say one of them holds a sealed crypt never opened. Others believe they lead to an archive, Aksum's real library, hidden for safekeeping during invasions. Are these rumors? Maybe. But the ground feels hollow beneath your feet. You meet a local boy sitting cross-legged near the tomb entrances. He's drawing in the dust. You peek over. He's sketching what looks like an Aksumite coin, complete with a tiny cross and a lion on one side. You ask where he learned it. He says, "It was in my grandfather's pocket." You ask if you can see it. He shrugs. "I buried it. It's safer that way." Fair enough. You walk to the church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, the holiest site in Ethiopia. The outer courtyard is peaceful. Birds flutter between olive trees. Pilgrims whisper prayers against the outer walls. And inside, though you cannot enter, lies what many believe is the true Ark of the Covenant, guarded by a single monk, hidden from the world. You will not see it. You are not meant to. That's the point. It's not about proving the legend. It's about living within it. You sit on a stone bench as evening falls. The call of evening prayer drifts through the air, mixing with the sound of distant drums. Incense curls upward. Children laugh nearby. You close your eyes. And there it is again. Not a sound, not a voice, but a presence. Aksum, still breathing. Before you go, you stop at a small shop selling carved wooden crosses, ceramic lions, and hand-woven scarves dyed with injera-colored indigo. The shopkeeper smiles. You ask him, "Do people still talk about the old kings?" He laughs softly. "Of course," he says, "we live on their bones." Then he adds, "And sometimes they visit us in dreams." You walk out of town that night with the moon behind you and the scent of myrrh lingering in your clothes. The wind carries faint voices, maybe echoes, maybe memory, maybe just the whisper of history refusing to be forgotten. Now, slow your breathing. Let the hills fade behind your eyes. Let the stone stelae crumble gently into fog. Let the voices of monks and merchants dissolve into wind. You've walked far tonight, across time, through silence, into stories carved not just in rock, but in memory. The rise of Aksum wasn't loud. It didn't thunder like Rome or blaze like Babylon. It whispered its way into greatness. And it lasted because it learned how to listen. To rivers, to stars, to faith. You've followed those same paths, felt the same earth, stood in the same shadows. And now your feet are tired. Your mind is quiet. Your breath is soft. So sink into stillness. Let the coins rest beneath the soil. Let the churches echo their last note. Let the lion return to its stone. There's nothing left to search for tonight. You've already found it, the presence, The peace, the memory, you carry it now. Let the darkness wrap gently around your shoulders. Let your thoughts stretch like sleepy vines. You are safe. You are home. Hey, friends. Tonight, we walk through a garden, not the chaotic candlelit stock exchange floor you might expect when hearing the words tulip mania. No desperate bankers throwing coins, no dramatic crashes, no crying merchants holding a single flower in their trembling hands. No, tonight, you stroll into a world that feels surprisingly gentle before the frenzy, before the madness. Back when the tulip was not yet a symbol of greed, but a tender obsession rooted in wonder, beauty, and maybe a little botanical mischief. You step into early 1600s Holland, where the canals shimmer under a cool morning mist, and the smell of damp earth and pipe smoke floats through the air. A woman walks past you carrying a basket of bulbs like their treasure. In her other hand, a piece of cheese. Because even then, priorities mattered. And here's a funny thought. If you lived in 1636 and someone offered you a rare tulip bulb for the price of a house, you'd probably say, absolutely not. But if they offered you a cat named Mr. Petals wearing a bonnet, you'd at least ask for pictures. So maybe we're not that different. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now turn off the lights, let your fan hum its little lullaby, and let's begin tonight's journey. You're walking along a cobblestone street in Leiden, sometime in the first quarter of the 17th century. It smells faintly of linen and fresh ink. The printing houses buzz. This city, with its newly founded university, is a magnet for ideas and seeds, literally. Merchants here are obsessed with plants, strange ones, rare ones, ones that don't behave, and none are stranger than the tulip. The flower isn't even native to Europe. It came, believe it or not, from the Ottoman Empire by way of botanical diplomacy. Some say it was first seen in the gardens of Suleiman the Magnificent. Others claim it arrived in a bundle of stolen seeds tucked into the robes of a curious Flemish traveler. Historians still debate whether the tulip arrived as an official gift or an illegal souvenir. But once it landed, oh, it flourished. You walk through the garden of Carolus Clusius, one of the earliest tulip obsessives. He was a botanist with a beard so large it might qualify as its own neighborhood. He planted the first known tulips in Dutch soil in 1593 and kept careful notes about their colors, shapes, and behaviors. And that's where the strangeness begins. One spring morning, Clusius noticed something odd. Some tulips had flames. Not literal fire, though that would be impressive, but streaks of color. Deep purples slashed through pale yellow petals, fiery reds licking the edges of soft pinks. It wasn't natural, not predictable. He called them broken tulips. And here comes your curious fact of the night. These broken patterns were caused by a virus, specifically the tulip-breaking virus spread by aphids. But Clusius didn't know that. No one did. And because the effect was beautiful, it became the holy grail of tulip breeders. You stop and crouch next to one now, still blooming in the shadow of Clusius's old garden wall. It looks like it's been painted by a moody angel. You can't look away. and neither could 17th century Holland. You stroll through an early tulip fair. No frantic traders yet, just gardeners and guild members talking shop over beer and bread. The air smells like wet soil and roasted almonds. Someone holds up a bulb like it's a jewel. It's wrapped in cloth, handled delicately. It doesn't even have a flower yet, just the promise of one. You ask how much it costs. He says, more than my neighbor's wife is worth. He laughs, hopefully joking, maybe not. The value of tulips begins to rise, slowly, gently, like a tide you don't notice until your feet are soaked. This isn't the mania yet. This is fascination. A culture falling in love with color, with rarity, with the idea that something so ephemeral could carry so much meaning. And now your academic quarrel of the section. Did tulip mania really exist the way we're told? Some historians argue that the entire madness story was exaggerated, possibly invented by Calvinist moralists who wanted to mock greed. Others say the records are clear. Prices soared, fortunes were made and lost, and the flower became a stand-in for financial fantasy. There's even debate over how many people were actually involved. Was it the whole country? Just a niche group of traders? Still unresolved, still deliciously mysterious. You pass a painter sitting on a stool. He's sketching a tulip with the tenderness of a man drawing his first crush. You peek at the canvas. It's not even that good. But his devotion is real. And you start to understand this wasn't just about money. It was about control over beauty. A way to own something that shouldn't be ownable. To say this strange wild bloom that comes from the east and flickers in and out of existence, it's mine. You walk past rows of tulips now, some upright and proud, others drooping from too much affection. A child hands you one, beaming. It's simple, red with yellow edges. You thank her. Later, you'll press it between the pages of a book you haven't written yet. You sit on a bench beside a canal. There's no frenzy, no crash, no moral lesson yet. Just people, curious, ambitious, occasionally ridiculous, trying to hold on to beauty before it fades. You lean back. The breeze smells like spring, and the water reflects the petals drifting gently by. The tulip, by now, is more than a flower. It's a language, one whispered between neighbors over hedges, passed in coded notes between merchants, scribbled in margins of ledgers that would never reach the tax office. Everyone has an opinion, everyone has a theory, and everyone, quietly, politely, is watching the price creep. You walk into a small tavern in Harlem. The place smells like warm bread, stale tobacco, and opportunity. At the corner table, two men speak in low voices. You slide into a bench nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. They're talking about a Semper Augustus, not a Roman emperor, a tulip. White petals, crimson flames, perfect symmetry. It's rumored to be one of the rarest bulbs in all the Netherlands, only a few known specimens. One was just promised for sale, not sold, not delivered, but promised, for a price equivalent to what a skilled artisan might earn in 10 years. You raise an eyebrow. The man next to you shrugs. It'll bloom for a week, he says, but for that week, you're a god. You step outside again. The wind off the canal carries the scent of peat smoke and roasted fish. Above you, laundry flaps on lines strung between crooked houses. Below your feet, the cobblestones are slick from yesterday's rain. A woman in a tall lace bonnet stands at her stall selling tulip drawings. She's not a gardener. She doesn't grow a single flower, but she sketches them from memory, her hands moving like she's drawing saints. You ask her how much for the illustration of a viceroy. She eyes you carefully. 5 guilders, she says, or 3 if you tell me the name of the man who offered to buy the real thing last week. You don't know the name, but you buy the sketch anyway. And now comes your bizarre fact of the evening. Tulip bulbs weren't just sold physically, they were traded via futures contracts. That's right. By the early 1630s, buyers were paying now for tulips that hadn't even bloomed yet, often without ever seeing the bulb. Some of these contracts were written on scraps of paper. Some weren't written at all. They called it the wind handle, wind trade, because often what you were buying didn't exist yet, kind of like NFTs, but with a slightly higher chance of getting dirt under your nails. You walk through an auction hall, not a grand space, just a repurposed bakery where flour used to settle into cracks between floorboards. A chalkboard displays bulb names like prizes. Admiral van der Eyck, Lac van Rijn, General Boulevard. Each has its own following. Each is a celebrity in root form. A man with gloves on both hands holds up a single bulb like it's sacred. Someone offers 10 guilders. Someone else coughs and says 20. A third shouts, 40 and a hog. You glance around. That last one might have been a joke or a new payment method. Outside, things are quieter. You walk along a canal at dusk. The sky is a deep watercolor of pink and gray. Your reflection ripple in the water next to the thin stalks of tulips swaying in garden beds beside the street. You pass a school where children are practicing their letters using tulip names. One girl writes Paragon in looping script. Another boy writes Switzer with so many flourishes it looks like a swan taking flight. You think about how fast it's all moved, how this flower, once a curiosity, a gift from a distant empire, is now a full-blown obsession, not just among elites, but among everyone. Barbers, bakers, sailors, even chimney sweeps talk about color variants now. And here comes the big scholarly debate of the night. Was tulip mania really a financial crisis or a moral tale told too well? Some historians argue that yes, prices collapsed and people were ruined. Others say the market corrected itself quickly, with little real consequence outside a small group of speculators. Some even suggest the whole mania was invented later to paint the Dutch as foolish and greedy. One scholar called it a financial footnote, blown out of proportion by preachers and poets. Another simply said, "It's true. I lost a cow over a daffodil." That one might not have been a scholar. You pass by a small garden tucked behind a bakery. No one's there. The gate creaks open. Inside, rows of tulips, many still closed for the night. You kneel beside one. A broken flame pattern catches the last sliver of moonlight. It's not famous. It doesn't have a name, but it's perfect. And for a moment, you understand. It was never about the money, or the market, or the madness. It was about the moment when something ordinary, a plant, a bulb, a dirt-covered root, burst into unexpected beauty. You lean back in the grass. The wind is soft, and for the first time in hours, you stop thinking. You just look. It's early morning now, and the mist sits low over the water, curling between chimneys and dipping beneath narrow wooden bridges. You walk slowly, the sound of your steps softened by a world that hasn't quite decided to wake up yet. The tulip fields are just beginning to glow with light. You pass rows upon rows of green shoots just breaking the surface. Most bulbs haven't bloomed, but the anticipation is thick in the air. A gardener nods to you as he covers a bed with canvas, murmuring something about frost and fortune. In this season, weather means everything. A single cold snap could kill a whole bed of rare tulips. A damp spring could rot bulbs underground before they ever flower. And that's what makes the trade so tempting, so unstable, because it's built on something you can't control. That's your truth of the morning. The tulip market was never just about money. It was also about hope. Buying a bulb in winter was an act of faith, a wager on the future, on color, on survival. You walk past a window where a tulip catalog is displayed. Each variety is listed like a work of art: Gouda purple, flame pattern, late bloom, rare, Admiral Leafkins, yellow streaked red, early bloomer, Viceroy, intense striping, limited yield. Prices are written in shaky ink, some crossed out, some raised, some gone entirely. You reach for a price sheet posted on a nearby door. At the bottom, someone's scribbled in charcoal: "No flower is worth a house, but every flower is worth a story." You head into the city again, this time to Amsterdam, where the canals form concentric rings like ripples from a pebble thrown into a vast, still pond. Here, tulips aren't just planted, they're displayed. In crystal vases on mahogany desks, in elaborate oil paintings commissioned by men who think beauty is better when it's framed. You step into one of those homes. A merchant, modestly rich by modern standards, but probably the Jeff Bezos of butter and fish sauce back then, invites you into a room with a single tulip in a porcelain jar. The flower is tilted slightly. The window light catches its streaks. You ask if it's real. He smirks. No, he says. The real one's too valuable. This is painted silk. He's not joking. Let's break the mood with your strange detail of the day. At the height of tulip mania, some bulbs were traded dozens of times in a single day, without anyone ever planting them. One man was said to have sold a bulb he didn't own, bought it back, and traded it again before breakfast. So yes, it's accurate to say that some people were flipping imaginary flowers, like day trading wizards in wooden shoes. You smile. The Dutch always were good with trade. You leave the house and wander through the flower market, which at this hour is more talk than bloom. Crates are being unloaded. Men haggle over paper promises. A woman scolds her husband for betting their winter cheese allowance on a bulb he can't even pronounce. You hear names fly through the air like magic spells: Admiral von der Eyck, Viceroy, General Bull. each one a fantasy, a symbol, a secret. You step aside as a wheelbarrow nearly clips your foot. Inside, only two things: a bulb wrapped in waxed paper and a goose. You don't ask. You cross a footbridge as the sun begins to break through the clouds. A child leans over the railing, holding a tulip between two fingers, like it's a fragile flame. You ask her what color it is. She says, "It hasn't told me yet." You nod. Seems fair. Because in this world, a tulip isn't just a tulip. It's a question, a symbol, a trickster god in botanical form. Now comes your scholarly argument of the hour. Was the beauty of the tulip the cause of the mania, or just the excuse? Some historians say it was about rarity, not beauty, that even ugly tulips, if rare, could fetch absurd prices. Others argue that the visual obsession was very real. People wanted the flames, the streaks, the mystery. And when those traits became signs of infection, well, that just made them even more desirable. Because people are weird. You are weird. And we've always paid too much for things that sparkle in the right light. You end your day in a small inn. No paintings, no contracts, just a potted tulip on a windowsill, leaning toward the setting sun. The innkeeper tells you she planted it herself, that her grandmother traded a painting for the bulb, that it only bloomed once. But that once, she says, was enough. You sit with that for a while, not just the story, but the silence after. Because this, here, before the crash, before the sermons and the cautionary tales, before the price charts and the economists, this is the part most people forget. The quiet, the bloom, the love of a single flower in a world that kept turning too fast. The wind changes. You're still in Holland, but the air feels different now, brisker, sharper. There's a current underneath the canals, a pull, as if something unseen has shifted just slightly off balance. You walk past a tavern and hear laughter that's just a little too loud, like someone trying to convince themselves they're still in control. Inside, a crowd leans around a table where two men argue over the price of a tulip that hasn't even bloomed. One of them is scribbling figures on a piece of slate. The other is holding a wilted drawing of a flower with thin, curling flames. You don't know who's winning, but you know the energy. It's hope covered in panic. You wander down an alley, boots echoing against wet stone. A merchant rushes by, carrying a box of contracts tied in twine. You ask him what he's got. He grins too wide and says, "Gold. Just need it to rain right." Then he disappears around the corner. You didn't ask about the weather, but that's kind of the point. In the span of a few months, the tulip trade has gone from a gentle obsession to a fever. And here's your first hard fact of the act. By late 1636, some tulip bulbs were changing hands 10, 20, even 30 times before they ever left the ground. They're not flowers anymore. They're certificates. They represent potential. And potential, it turns out, is very easy to inflate. You find yourself in a candlelit room where three men sit around a table. One's a shoemaker, one's a clerk. One, oddly enough, is a chimney sweep. None of them are florists. None of them own gardens. None of them can tell the difference between a Rembrandt and a Switzer tulip. And yet, here they are, betting their livelihoods on which flower will bloom stronger next spring. You watch the shoemaker hand over a piece of paper worth more than his entire workshop. You ask if he's nervous. He says, "Why would I be? The man I bought it from already sold it to someone else." You blink. So, he doesn't actually own it yet? No, he says. But I will. Probably. You step outside again, your mind slightly spinning from candle smoke and metaphors. You pass a man with a sign, "I trade pigs for petals." He nods. You nod. No further questions. This is where it begins to snowball. You overhear people talking tulips in the bakery, in the barber's shop, even in church. A preacher tries to tie tulip trading into a sermon about the Tower of Babel, but halfway through, someone in the back stands up and offers to buy his sermon notes if they contain the word Semper Augustus. They don't, yet. Now comes your odd fact of the hour. Some contracts included clauses about what happened if the tulip died before blooming. In those cases, the buyer was still liable unless it died in a specific kind of frost, not just any frost, the frost stipulated in the clause, which led to actual arguments about weather definitions. One man took another to court, claiming that the frost wasn't a true frost. It was more of a shiver. The court disagreed. You find yourself back in Harlem. The city feels different now, less curious, more tense. You visit a printer. His presses used to churn out poetry and pamphlets. Now, he's publishing daily tulip price sheets, like stock tickers, except instead of steel and shipping, it's colors and petals. He hands you a page. The numbers don't look real. They look like a dream someone had during a fever. Switzer, 1,000 guilders per bulb. Admiral Leifkin's, 1,200. Semper Augustus, price. Ask privately. You don't ask. You already know it's too much. And here's your scholarly debate of the night. Was tulip mania a true speculative bubble or a story reshaped by time? Many historians believe the economic impact was smaller than legends suggest. It didn't destroy the entire Dutch economy. Most trades were made by a small segment of society. But the cultural impact, the myth of the crash, that's what lasted. Because even when the numbers were moderate, the feeling was extreme. A society spinning itself dizzy over something as fleeting as a bloom. You pause beside a canal. It's quiet. Snow flurries drift across the water. In a window, you see a tulip drawing framed in silver. Underneath, in etched glass, a quote. For a time, we believed a flower could hold the weight of a future. You step closer. You believe it too. You're in a tavern again. Same wooden beams, same beer-stained tables, but the energy's different. It's louder, frenzied, a little dangerous in a way that has nothing to do with the ale and everything to do with what's on the table. Tulip contracts. Paper, just paper. Names, dates, bulb varieties, promises traded like coins. A shoemaker passes one to a baker, who passes it to a tailor, who folds it and tucks it into his sleeve like a secret. They barely look at the numbers, It's not about numbers anymore. It's about momentum. You sit in the corner, unnoticed. Someone's arguing that Viceroy will rise again. Another says Admiral von der Eyck has peaked. And a third, voice slurred, says, there's a man in Alkmaar who just traded a single bulb for a carriage, 2 horses, and his neighbor's niece's dowry. You don't ask how. You don't ask why. You just watch the candle burn low as paper after paper slides across tables, as futures are bought, sold, promised, imagined. You wonder when anyone last touched a real tulip. The next morning, the world feels hungover, even if you didn't drink. You walk through a market square where someone has set up a chalkboard exchange. The prices from last night are still written in streaky white lines. Lac van Rijn, 1,800, Switzer, 2,000, Semper Augustus, pending. But already the chalk is smudged. Already something is wobbling. You overhear a conversation. 2 merchants. One leans in close, whispering, I heard the Haarlem buyer defaulted, couldn't pay, says the bulb was rotted. The other frowns. He'll pay? The first one doesn't respond. Now comes your strange but true detail. In early 1637, just as the frenzy reached its peak, a single auction in Haarlem failed. No buyers stepped forward, no contracts were honored. Prices didn't just stall, they fell through the floor. Word spread like wildfire. Within days, the entire market shivered. Not collapsed yet, but shivered, like a fever breaking. You visit a tavern that night, and suddenly no one wants to talk about tulips. The same contracts are still tucked into pockets, but fewer are changing hands. A merchant who bought a dozen bulbs on credit now says, I was only helping a friend. A baker who traded away her front window for a single Viceroy bulb suddenly remembers that windows are kind of important. And then, a loud cough. Someone at the back tears up a contract, quietly. No one reacts. The sound of paper ripping is louder than the clinking of mugs. Outside, snow falls again. But this time, it doesn't feel poetic. It feels cold. You walk the streets of Haarlem, then Leiden, then Amsterdam. The chalkboards are being wiped clean. The catalogs pulled from windows. One florist puts a tulip painting on sale for half its price. No takers. At a canal, you see a young man sitting on a bench with a bulb in his hands. He's staring at it, not like it's beautiful, more like it's betrayed him. You sit beside him, say nothing. Finally, he whispers, they said this one would bloom like fire. You ask if it did. He shrugs. It never made it out of the ground. Now comes your scholarly debate of the hour. Was the tulip crash truly catastrophic or socially convenient? Many historians argue that the people hit hardest weren't poor citizens or small farmers. They were middlemen, traders, speculators, people who entered late and got caught when the game stopped. Others say the Dutch economy recovered quickly, that the crash was emotional more than financial. Either way, it shifted something. The mania didn't just vanish, it was remembered, retold, reframed into sermons, warnings, moral tales. You walk into a church. The preacher's voice booms from the pulpit. Beware of the flower that promises gold. Its petals fall faster than your fortune. Behind him, a painted window shows a tulip wilting beside a skull. Subtle? Not really. Effective? Absolutely. You head to the countryside, away from the cities, away from the chalkboards, away from the noise. In a small village, you see tulips blooming in quiet rows again. No names, no prices, just color, red, yellow, purple streaked with white. An old woman tends to them with bare hands. You ask her if she ever sold bulbs. She smiles. Sell? She says. I gave one to my neighbor last spring. You ask what kind. She shrugs. Doesn't matter. It made her smile. And suddenly, you're back at the beginning, back before the frenzy, back before the trade, back to why anyone loved the flower in the first place. That night, you sit under a tree near the garden. The stars above you shimmer like dewdrops, waiting for dawn. You hold a tulip sketch in your lap, one you kept from Leiden. The colors faded, the lines soft, but somehow it's enough. You leave the garden quietly, like sneaking out of a dream. The road ahead is calm again. The world has exhaled. But as you walk, past canals and sheep fields, tulip beds and broken chalkboards, you start to feel something strange. The tulips didn't change. We did. You arrive in a small village near Alkmaar. A boy waves you over to a barn where his grandfather keeps an old ledger. It's thick, the leather cover worn smooth from time and fingers. Inside, page after page of names, bulb varieties, numbers scrawled like hurried prayers. He shows you one entry. A single bulb, traded 8 times in 2 weeks. Final value, nothing. The boy laughs. He said it was the best lesson he ever paid for. You walk through town. No one's angry, no riots, no torches. Just a kind of quiet embarrassment, like someone telling a joke that didn't land. A woman paints tulips on her shutters. A baker offers a tulip-shaped pastry. A teacher in a schoolyard uses tulip prices as a math problem. If a Switzer was worth 1,500 guilders last year, and now it's 30, what's the lesson? One student shrugs. Don't plant money? Close enough. And here's your historical curiosity of the night. Though the crash came fast, many bulbs weren't even harvested yet. The contracts were for future delivery. So when prices collapsed, the tulips were still in the ground. Imagine owning something that never technically existed, losing everything over a flower that hasn't even bloomed. It's not just tragic, it's poetic, and maybe a little dumb. You visit a warehouse once used for tulip storage. Now, it's half empty. A few crates remain, each marked with names you've come to know like old friends. Semper Augustus, Viceroy, General Boulevard. You lift the lid on one. Inside, a handful of bulbs. No glow, no aura. Just brown, lumpy, slightly moldy roots. They look like nothing, but once they were dreams. You step back outside as the bells ring in Haarlem. Church hour. In the square, a small crowd gathers around a preacher holding up a tulip. He waves it like a relic. Vanity, he cries. We gave it value, and it laughed at us. Then he drops it. You expect it to shatter. It doesn't. It just bounces slightly on the wood, then rolls away. Even the crash is underwhelming. You wander north to Enkhuizen, a port town. Boats rock in the harbor. Fishmongers shout their morning deals. Tulips aren't on anyone's lips. They've moved on, traded beauty for bread again. At a cafe, two old men play cards. You hear one say, "I bought one, sold it, bought it again, same bulb." He laughs. "Best game I ever lost." You ask if he regrets it. "No," he says, "but I water my flowers myself now. Don't pay others to imagine them for me." You sip your coffee. It's bitter, but real. Now for your final scholarly tangle of the act. Was tulip mania a failure or a phase? Some historians now suggest it was a natural blip, an early lesson in speculation, yes, but also a cultural movement, a seasonal fever, an artistic hysteria, a dance with risk. And like all good dances, it ended with someone stepping on toes. But maybe the goal wasn't profit. Maybe the goal was to see how much meaning we could place on a single, delicate, absurdly beautiful thing, and how long it could hold before collapsing. You walk again through the fields. No buyers, no sellers, just rows of tulips, blooming like they've always bloomed, completely unaware of what they were worth 2 winters ago. A girl waves at you from across the rows. She's picking flowers, not rare ones, just the kind that make her smile. You ask if she sells them. She shakes her head. "I give them away." To who? To anyone who walks far enough to find me. You smile. You've walked far. You take the tulip she offers and tuck it behind your ear. The wind is soft. The sky is pale blue. The madness is over. But the beauty? Still here. The fields stretch out behind you now, rows and rows of tulips standing at gentle attention like they were never part of a mania, never sold for fortunes, never whispered about in corners of dimly lit taverns. You walk along the edge of a canal as the sun begins to slide downward. The water glows gold. A barge drifts past slowly, loaded not with flowers, but with firewood. Practical things. The cities are quieter now. The ledgers have closed. The printers have gone back to publishing sermons and wedding announcements. The chalkboards are blank. But the tulips, they keep blooming. You enter a garden tucked behind an old chapel. No signs, no prices. Just a modest bed of flowers, tended by a man with thick gloves and a straw hat. He's humming to himself as he works, gently brushing frost from a few leaves. You compliment the flowers. He grins. "No one wants to buy them anymore," he says, "which means I finally get to grow them for myself." You help him water a few rows. He talks about the bulbs like children, each one with a name, a temperament, a little drama. "This one sulks in the shade," he says. "This one opens too fast." You ask if he ever traded bulbs during the mania. He nods, then shrugs. "It wasn't all bad. It taught us who we were pretending to be." You let that one sit for a while. Later, you find a tavern by the sea. Wind whistles through cracked windows. A woman behind the counter pours you warm wine and slides you a plate of bread and pickled onions. There's a tulip sketch pinned behind the bar, faded, edges curled. You ask if it's for sale. She laughs. It never was. And now, your final curious fact of the night. The Dutch didn't ban tulip trading. They didn't burn the fields. There was no sweeping reform, no bonfire of bulbs. The market simply unraveled. Prices dropped. Contracts were ignored. People moved on. And just a few decades later, tulips were still blooming in every respectable Dutch garden. Just not for sale. You leave the tavern as the sun dips fully below the horizon. You stand on a hill overlooking the sea, tulip fields behind you, waves ahead. The mania is over, the lessons mostly learned, but the flowers, they're still here, and in the darkening wind, you hear them whisper, soft, not smug. We never asked for any of it. The wind is softer now. You're walking through morning fog along a quiet village lane. The cobblestones are damp. The houses are still. There's no sign of fever here, no frenzied scribbling, no bartering in doorways, no shouts of general bowl echoing down the canal. Just the sound of your steps, the distant splash of a heron, a world returning to itself. You pause by a garden gate. Behind it, tulips sway gently in the breeze. Ordinary ones, red, yellow, a few white. Nothing broken, nothing rare. And yet, they are breathtaking. You kneel. Let your fingers brush the petals. They're smooth, dewy, warm from the first light. These aren't the flowers of speculation anymore. They're just flowers. And that, finally, is enough. You visit a local museum. It's modest. A single room, wooden beams above, polished tile below. In the corner sits a small glass case. Inside, a single tulip bulb. Beside it, a label. Estimated value at peak, 3,000 guilders. Purchased today for $1. You chuckle. A man behind you says, some people laugh, some cry. You turn. He's the curator. Wears a vest full of tulip pins. Smells faintly of soap and apples. He tells you the bulb isn't real, just a replica. The original rotted in the ground 400 years ago. But this one tells the story better. You ask what story that is. He says that beauty isn't a currency, and when it becomes one, we forget how to see it. You walk back through the streets. The clouds have lifted, revealing a pale blue sky. Sunlight kisses the rooftops. You hear someone playing a viola da gamba through an open window. The music floats across the canal like spilled wine, deep, slow, slightly mournful. And you think, maybe this wasn't about flowers. Maybe it was about what we put into them. Desire, status, fear, longing. The tulip never changed. But we did. You pass a schoolhouse. Children are coloring tulips onto parchment. A girl shows you hers. It has stripes that spiral like cinnamon bark. You ask what kind it is. She says, it's called the one my grandma likes. You nod. Best variety you've heard all day. Now for your unexpected historical detail. After the tulip craze faded, the Dutch didn't stop loving flowers. In fact, they doubled down. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Holland had become the global epicenter of flower cultivation, exporting bulbs, developing greenhouses, and turning the humble act of growing into a national identity. So, yes, there was a crash, but also there was rebirth. The mania ended, but the passion never left. It just matured. You walk through a greenhouse now, one of the early ones. Steam curls from pipes beneath glass. Inside, tulips bloom in ordered rows, proud, unapologetic, serene. A woman in an apron guides you through. She tells you the names without drama. No admirals, no generals, just soft names like Moonblush and Field Light. You ask if she knows about the old bulbs. She nods. I've read the stories. But my tulips? They're for my table, my daughter's wedding, my neighbor's birthday. You realize she's not just a grower, she's a healer. You step outside again. The sky is wide. The fields behind you are endless. And you understand at last, tulip mania didn't ruin beauty. It just reminded us how easy it is to forget what beauty is for. You leave the greenhouse behind as a breeze follows you down the road, soft and curious, like it's trying to remember your name. The landscape is dotted with low houses and neat fences. Laundry flaps in the wind. A cat watches you from a windowsill with the judgmental eyes of someone who lived through the tulip craze and didn't spend a single guilder. You walk past an orchard blooming with apple blossoms, their petals falling like confetti. Everything smells fresh, damp, alive. And ahead of you, a windmill turns. Slow, rhythmic, steady. Not like the whirlwind that came before. You enter a small inn nearby, where the walls are covered in paintings of tulips, but not grand oil portraits. These are watercolors, soft, imperfect, personal, each one signed by a different hand, some childlike, some meticulous, all unpriced. The innkeeper offers you a cup of warm milk and a plate of bread with salted butter. He doesn't mention tulips. He just says, sit. Rest your feet, the road's been long. You sit, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel the need to ask a question or take a note or study the shadows of history. You just eat your bread and breathe. Later, you find yourself by a canal again. The water reflects a sky so calm it feels like a trick. You meet an old man fishing with a line tied to a crooked stick. He wears boots patched in 3 places and hums a tune from a time before markets had digital tickers. You ask if he remembers the tulip madness. He squints. Of course, he says, we all do. You ask what it felt like. He reels in nothing and smiles. It felt like trying to catch spring in a jar. Then he leans forward. But I'll tell you a secret. Spring never lives in jars. It grows in gardens. You nod, not just out of agreement, but out of understanding, because that's what this whole journey has been, hasn't it? Not a crash, not a warning, not even a mistake, but a lesson in scale. How easily we make something small into something enormous, and how quickly it withers when we hold it too tightly. You pace a chapel on a hill where a choir is practicing. The sound rolls down the slope like honey. Inside, the altar is decorated with tulips, not rare ones, simple ones, red and yellow, local, familiar. A woman tells you the flowers were grown by the congregation. No one sold them. No one bought them. They just grew because they could, because they were beautiful, because they were never meant to be more than themselves. Now, your final historical reflection of the journey. Tulip mania remains to this day a symbol in books, in documentaries, in lectures. It's used to warn, to mock, to teach. But maybe we've misread the story. Maybe it wasn't about how foolish people were. Maybe it was about how deeply we crave meaning, how hungry we are to turn color into currency, and how easily we confuse wanting something with needing to own it. You walk through a field one last time. The blooms stretch out like a quilt of color. No labels, no names, just the earth doing what it does best when left alone. At the edge of the field, a child runs toward you with a fistful of tulips, crushed, wild, fragrant. She holds them out to you without a word. You take them. No price, no promise, just beauty given. And this time, you don't measure their worth. You just say thank you. Evening is falling again. You're walking along the last stretch of canal, where the light softens into that golden blur that makes everything look like a memory. You pause at a stone bridge and look down. The water is perfectly still, except for one floating petal, a single tulip petal, drifting lazily like it has nowhere better to be, and neither do you. The windmill turns slowly in the distance. A baker closes her shutters. A boy kicks a ball made of rags across a cobbled alley. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then falls quiet. You've walked the long story of the tulip, and now it walks with you. You pass by a printing shop with its doors open wide. Inside, an old press is still running, printing flyers for a flower fair. Nothing extravagant, just spring market, fresh tulips, free for children. The printer spots you and waves you in. He offers you a flyer. You read it, smile, and ask, "Do people still come for the flowers?" He laughs. Only now they come to see, not to speculate. He holds up a page from his shelf, a reproduction of a 1636 price sheet. You recognize the names: Semper Augustus, Viceroy, Switzer, each one with prices scribbled next to it, like lottery numbers. You know, he says, people always think the most interesting part is the crash, but the better part is what came after. You ask what that was. He hands you a fresh printed flyer. It says, "We grow them for joy now." You exit the shop and walk past a courtyard filled with pots. Each one holds a different variety of tulip, some striped, some plain, some tilted to one side like they're listening in. A girl waters them one by one, humming softly to herself. You ask which one is her favorite. She doesn't hesitate. "The one I grew from my mother's bulb," she says. The flower doesn't look special, but the roots remember her hands. You say nothing, because there's nothing else to say. You climb a hill at the edge of the village. From here, you can see the outlines of every place you've been: Haarlem, Leiden, Amsterdam, the fields, the churches, the greenhouses, the garden beds where it all began. It looks peaceful now, almost ordinary. And maybe that's the greatest gift of all, that something once worshipped and fought over and traded like treasure can return quietly to its natural form. A flower, just a flower, no contracts, no madness, only light and bloom and wind. One last story before the night ends. You enter a home where an elderly couple sits by the fire. The woman knits. The man is reading a book you can't quite see. They offer you tea and a stool. The woman pulls a bulb from a small box. It's wrapped in linen. She says, "This one has been in our family for 7 generations." You ask if it's valuable. She shakes her head. Not anymore. You ask if she'll plant it. She smiles. Not yet. I'm saving it for the first spring my granddaughter remembers. You finish your tea. You thank them. You step back outside. The stars have returned. You hold a tulip sketch in your pocket. It's worn at the edges. You never did sell it, never even tried. And now, looking at the flowers blooming quietly in every garden, you realize why. Some things are meant to be carried, not cashed in. You lie down in a field near the edge of the woods. The air smells like soil and sweetness. The tulips rustle gently beside you, tall and kind. The sky overhead is velvet dark. A few stars flicker behind drifting clouds. You breathe in deeply, and the story settles. Not with a bang, not with a crash, but with a bloom.